Well, we got some nice swinging jazz from KCSM on. I wanted to just talk a little bit about dissonance today. I know it's a huge subject, but I couldn't help but notice a few examples come on the radio right after I got out of a lesson with a student where we were talking heavily about dissonance and how to use dissonance specifically in the context of their original music. And as you guys can imagine, that is a huge subject. How do you use dissonance? And I found that, well, maybe give some examples first, right? I asked the student kind of like what their favorite example of super dissonant music was, and they pointed out Radiohead's "These Are My Twisted Words." "These Are My Twisted Words" is an absolutely nuts kind of song to analyze from like a harmonic perspective. And even for Radiohead's catalog, it's way on the dissonant end. You can see that when they play it live, it's one of their favorite songs to jam out on, as if, you know, they're just playing for themselves and the rest of the audience happens to be there at the same time. You can see they really enjoy it, but if you stack it up, you know, just from kind of looking at what notes are hitting your ears at the same time, comparing it to all other songs that they put out, it's a unique one. It's very unique, and probably not the rule, more the exception than the rule. And I was just thinking, because I heard another example right before on All Things Considered. They had like this kind of this little snippet. I wish I was recording during that snippet, where like this kind of band that sounded a little bit like American football, they had this repeating guitar riff, and it was like a 7-1-5 da 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 da. The chord progression was 2, and then it was, I think I can't remember what chord it was, but then there was a third chord, and it was a flat 7. So you had a flat 7, a 2, and a 4 inside the flat 7 chord. And then the flat 7 was clashing with the 7 in the repeating riff. So you had 7 and flat 7, da 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 da, happening at the same time as ba. And for some reason, it worked within the context of that snippet. It really did. And it also reminded me of one of my buddy's songs. Nick Ball, aka The Air on Earth, who just came out with an absolutely gorgeous album a couple months ago. I happened to be playing on one of the songs. It's not why it's gorgeous, but it's gorgeous. It's just super lush and really beautiful sounding record. But yeah, he has a part where he had also a 7 and a flat 7 sounding at the same time. And while I was sitting in the studio with him while this was being recorded, like, music theory teacher guy said, I have an issue with this, you know? And in that instance, I thought it wasn't a clash that would work well. Now, what's the difference between a 7 and a flat 7 in the context of that album, where it was in a minor 5 chord, and then there was a melody singing a 7? So the minor chord had the flat 7 in it because it was 5, flat 7, and 9. A minor 5 chord has those 3 notes. And the vocal melody had 6, 7, 8, 6, 10, or 6, 7, 8, 6, 3 an octave higher. That's what 10 is, right? What made that not work, and what made the other one work? And then what makes Radiohead's example of dissonance work for them, but maybe not work for others? So as you guys can see, like, you know, I don't know what I was going to really, my point was going to be when I turned this on, but it's a huge subject. And I think the conversation between me and my student ended up going somewhere interesting, which was, I think there's a time and a place where it works. There's a time and place where it's welcome. And you have to kind of figure out whether that whether that dissonance is earned. Is it earned? I would say that if Radiohead came out with, think about it this way, if Radiohead came out with These Are My Twisted Words as their very first song ever, before Creep, they probably wouldn't have gotten a record deal from EMI Capital, or whoever it was they signed with originally. It's like Parlophone. They probably wouldn't have gotten a record deal. They probably would have gotten mad respect from whoever, would have been listening to them and appreciating that song for what it is. But they themselves, I don't know if they ever would have written it had they not gone through the rest of their catalog to maybe get there, where they could be okay with putting a song like that out, where it's so difficult the first time you hear it. It's spooky and it's unsettling and it's all sorts of wrong, but it feels somehow right, So, got a lot of glare right now. I'll cover the camera lens. But so like there's a time and a place for dissonance, right? If you think about how dissonance is perceived from the musicology perspective, music in general, capital M music, got more dissonant as time went on, right? It was kind of a sign of like, a sophisticated culture, right? And then the less dissonance you had, like maybe it was more primitive, and that's why musicology in general should be questioned. But there's this idea of like 20th century music, or like 12-tone music, or film scores, right? You just look at that, and dissonance is like not a big deal. Dissonance is not only welcome, it's actually a essential building block of some of this music, right? But as far as popular music is concerned, as far as our like, common musical vernacular, I would say we haven't really gotten too far beyond typical diatonic chord progressions, right? And then deviations from that are usually still perceived as interesting, and dissonance is used in very small doses. And the silly analogy I ended up with was, this student, he's in Chicago. I said, if you gave me a deep dish pizza, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna add one tiny ingredient to it. I'm gonna add stinky tofu. I asked him, I think he got the point, But the idea is, first of all, have you ever had stinky tofu? What is it doing in this video? If you've not had stinky tofu, it smells like it sounds, and it tastes actually really amazing if you like stuff that's fermented, especially if you get the fried kind. There's a type of stinky tofu and a time and a place for stinky tofu, and it is not deep dish pizza. I think that was the point I was trying to make to him. But the point of dissonance is this certain note might create some really weird interactions with what you have going on in the song already. So when you use it, is it really doing something for the pizza? Is it really doing something for it? Or maybe what you need is not this pizza. Maybe you need something else to make that thing work better. And the analogy went further, and it was like, there is a time and place for stinky tofu. If you're in Taiwan, it's late at night, you've had several beers that you've knocked back, and you are there and on the street, and there's a street food vendor, and it's like freshly fried, served with some hot sauce and some pickled cabbage. Yeah, it's time for stinky tofu, but not on the deep dish pizza, right? So, you see what I'm saying? Like, I told Ellen this, and she immediately just said, oh, stinky tofu might be good on deep dish pizza. So that totally wrecked my entire point that I'm making in this video right now. But to answer, kind of like circle back, right? What is all this talk about a dissonance, right? I think it's a really important question for every single songwriter and producer at home to think through that question. what kind of dissonance do you like? Do you just like all dissonance indiscriminately? Do you like putting things in and having them be dissonant because there's a point that you want to kind of make with inserting that into your music? Is the dissonance used lightly and tastefully? Is it something that you throw in there without much thought and without much consideration, right? So there's like all sorts of, you know, kind of angles to look at what dissonance is, because really dissonance is an abstraction, right? Consonance and dissonance is an abstraction. Just like syncopation and rhythm, you know, you can't play a syncopated rhythm without having it syncopate against the established rhythm, right? Does that make sense? So in that same way, like when you think about dissonance, it's an abstraction. How can we make sense of it? I think it, long story short, is you guys got to figure out where it's going and does it want to be there? Is the song going to welcome that there? So I don't know, hopefully this helps someone. It just, maybe I just made it for myself, just to help me myself think through some of my beliefs on dissonance. But anyway, that's what these videos are. I'm at my destination already, so I'm just gonna cut this video off here. But yeah, dissonance. What do you guys think about dissonance? How do you use it? If you use it at all intentionally in your music, how do you kind of view it? When is it appropriate to have a 7 and a flat 7 at the same time? Is it genre specific? Because I think that actually played a role in like the difference between the Air on Earth album, called Good Sport, by the way, and the example I heard on All Things Considered. It played a role. The genre played a role. All right, take it easy, guys. Okay, I just had to add the addendum, because how could I forget about jazz? You hear this song right now? This is the one, but it's got a flat 3 and a 3 at the same time. So the home chord in this song is both major and minor at the same time. It feels like Herbie. I wonder who did it.
Gene Harris with Ernie Watts on alto sax
was wrong.
and Nat Adderley.
I don't know who Gene Harris is. But yeah, just wanted to add the addendum to bolster the claim that dissonance is genre specific, which in a roundabout way is saying context matters. Deep dish pizza, stinky tofu, context matters.